everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us here at Houston Center for Contemporary Craft this afternoon in celebration of La Fuente del Deseo by Georgina Treviño. This is her first institutional solo exhibition, and we are so honored and privileged to be presenting her work. She is a visionary creator and has really honed in on this very singular jewelry language, and we're excited to get into it in this walkthrough. So please join me in welcoming Georgina. Okay, so to start, could you tell us a little bit about La Fuente del Deseo and the concept of the exhibition, and particularly the heart of the fountain?
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for being here. So this has been like a really special show, especially working with Sarah since the beginning, since she invited me. We've been also friends, so it's been really interesting that when she invited me, I had all these crazy ideas, and she was literally so open to anything that I was, any ideas that I could bring here. And actually, I think I was supposed to do, I think only 2 rooms at the beginning, and then she's like, how about we add a 3rd one? And I was like, I never done something this big, but I feel like my work has many realms of, like I have different directions of work. I come from like a contemporary jewelry background, and then now I'm starting to jump, from sculpture to installation to interactive pieces, but everything always has a jewelry language, as you could see in this room. So to begin with, the inspiration, I've been collecting a lot of like images of fountains, and just it comes from like my background of like I thought about these Zen places of like in Mexico City, perhaps like this fountain. Spaces that people kind of just gather around and just chill, right? So this was kind of like my little space that you just, sort of hear, meditate, etc. But it all started with the idea of how the relationship of metal and how we use a coin to toss to a fountain to make a wish. So that was like my relationship to it. And then I started thinking, I actually collect a lot of old jewelry. I go to swap meets, to markets, and I collect a lot of jewelry, and I love to recontextualize stuff. So in my head, I thought about this like crazy imagine like a pile of jewelry that you find in the swap meets or flea markets. So in my head was like a pile of jewelry converting into a fountain, and this is basically what I came up with. I wanted to add more, but there was no space. So this piece in general was a lot about process also, from the beginning to start, just kind of even gathering jewelry. I asked people to donate me jewelry that is discarded, and I think it's so beautiful when I think of like old jewelry. Like I think of how many people, or the stories behind all this jewelry, like who wore it, like the energy that this carries, right? Because there's just so many elements of jewelry that even in the process, and I say the process was so important because I and my assistants, we put each jewelry, so we were very selective of like what will go in it. So I know every single piece that was in the fountain. And in conjunction to the fountain, I thought about obviously like the coin idea that I said, and I wanted to create a coin that you could toss. And at first I was like, maybe I'll order coins and people can engrave. But I kept going back to this idea of like my childhood and how I collect like coins from like this, I don't know, like SeaWorld and like just, different places. And I ended up like designing this coin press machine, and it has, so I sent it out to Made, and I designed 4 coins. And the 4 coins the whole show is about desire. And I designed 4 coins that are based on this Botanica. I don't know if you have seen these Botanica places. They sell like incense and soaps. So these 4 designs are based on a soap that is called jabón esotéricos, I believe. So they sell them in like these little shops, and usually is like a soap for finding love, a soap for money, but they're very tacky and beautiful and just like very funny imagery, and I think the labels are very beautiful. So all of 4 are based on this soap. So the first one is actually me naked. I'm naked taking a selfie. So that one says, yo puedo más que tú, which means I can more than you. So kind of like a baddie, you know, like, so empowered. And then there's one that says ven dinero, which is a Lamborghini, and it's like for money to come to you. And then amarre de amor, 2 people, you know, making love. So that's find love. And then the last one is a saying that I say to myself every morning, which is, I don't chase, I attract, which is in Spanish, yo no persigo, yo atraigo. So they're all, you know, it's for you to pick a coin and toss it. And also I wanted to connect my practice also, right? So we have like a self-engraving station. So the idea of like picking your coin, you self-engrave a coin, and the back of the coin it says pide tu deseo. So you engrave your coin and then you toss it. And it's really beautiful because since I started doing this, I started thinking, I always think of like how can what I'm making can exist later on. So I'm thinking of making a little book or a scene on all the coins that you guys toss. So I'll be documenting all the coins that people are being tossing with your wishes anonymously, obviously. So yeah, I'm excited about like, you know, what people actually draw or something, a doodle and representation of your wish. And also, this metallic, like I want it just to be like so mystical, but also like my relationship to metal. So you're coming into like my little world of like, we start with an installation, and I'm trying to see if I forgot something about the fountain. And actually, if we go here, yeah. No. Oh, okay. I just wanted to briefly say on the left side, there's these vessels. So these were sort of like my prototypes to the fountain. So I was trying to find mediums that would stick, the jewelry would stick in a specific time to be dry. So these were actually the first ones that I made thinking of the fountain. And yeah, it was so beautiful. So like being here, I was here for a whole week doing the fountain and installing the show. And I feel it was a very different type of show maybe because I was able to like be here and work with Sarah and like just kind of, I'm a very spontaneous person, so I feel like things kept changing but in a great way. Like it was just very like organic and it was just so fun to like be playful, even though the place is playful too. And then this is the other room where, should I just?
Can I
yeah. You can add, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. So I love what you said about how the fountain is like referencing a specific place, which is at the center of, you know, the center of a piazza, plaza, and it's spaces where people convene. And I think what you have done in this exhibition is create this parallel or this analog between some jewelry, which we tend to think of as so intimate and small scale and personal, and community. So you're thinking about people coming together and how those two things, you know, how just a nameplate necklace and a fountain and a town square can both be these sites of belonging and identity and community. And you know, another thing that I think is so particular and about your work is, as you say, your jewelry language. And I was wondering if, as we go through, just as kind of like a thought experiment, if you could kind of show people, you know, how you see the spaces around you. A lot of these are referencing, you know, your home, where you grew up, around Tijuana and San Diego, the border. If you could just talk about how you see ornamentation in the world around you, how you notice it. Because I think if we start to train our eye, we start to see ornament everywhere. On the backs of cars, in the, you know, pennies lining the fountain, just ornamentation in the world.
Yeah, I think the work itself, it's like an extension of myself. Like the work, it's me. I'm very like this extra person. And also like most of the work is inspired by like my bicultural world. Like I live in the border, so a lot of my influences come from Tijuana, from being even on the border waiting in line, like everything that I see. And also, I'm usually between Tijuana, San Diego, LA, and Mexico City. So if you ask me the inspiration, those will be my 4 places. And it's just, just things I see. But as far as ornament, I think like everything is ornamented, right? Even a car is ornamented. Like if we look at the license plates, like that's jewelry for a car. So I feel like, in my head, everything is jewelry, yeah.
So we're moving from the first installation, and Georgina has conceptualized the exhibition into 3 kind of architectural sites. So we're going to be moving into the playground and the playscape, and I'll let you take it away and talk about the swings, the bench, and the license plates.
Yeah. So the first time that I started, actually, the first time that I jumped from actual like small scale to big scale was this bench. This is actually my artist proof. This was my first design that I did jumping from jewelry to like big scale. So this is basically, it's supposed to be like a nameplate necklace. So it says Siéntase Señora, which means sit down lady, which is based on like this funny meme. A lot of my friends think that I'm crazy and I'm always like moving around so much. So not only it says sit down lady, but it's like it's inviting you to sit down. So most of this series of benches invite you to sit down in like this sassy way, like like different texts that represent that. So yeah, this is a special text because that was the first one that I made, and I actually made a series of different texts, but all with that same concept. There's other ones that said, sentadita te ves más bonita, which means sitting down you look more pretty. Culona friquitona, so it's related to the booty, sitting down. And some have like musical influences behind it, like, I don't know, like Mexican music or reggaeton or just Latin in general. So as you see, it's a necklace. I did put like a lobster clasp, like referencing the necklace. And then after the benches, I thought of how can I make other pieces that are even smaller but still functional, and I started making like this swing series with different texts. And this text, these are, I haven't shown, this is new these are new works for here. They're all based on music that I used to listen, like norteño music, rancheras, but they all have a text that's related to a norteño song, but they all have about desire. They're all songs about desire. So there's one that's called La Más Deseada by Valentina Elizalde, one of my favorites. North music, Amor Platónico, which means platonic love, and Millonaria de Amor, which is millionaire of love. So there's all this like love and desire and wishing in the show. And this is the first time that I actually installed them more as an installation in a swing set. I had showed them prior to this just by themselves. So they're all, if someone acquires, they're an addition of 3, each of the swings. And then I guess moving to this piece, these are all based on like bumper stickers, and like in Mexico, I think Mexican my people are like, in Mexico, we have a way of like, it's just very interesting the way sometimes we could be tacky and funny, like the use of the words and things people put in, even in their stores, like their taco shops or in their cars. So this is based on like the decals that people have on their cars. So I started collecting images that I see, and I also collected images from other people that I follow that have images of this text. So there's some that says, let's say, traviesa, which is like naughty, súbase, agárrese y cállese, which is get in, hold on, and shut up. Telocico, which means shut up. La tóxica, the toxic, La pesadilla, my nightmare. So it's just like very interesting and funny text that we see, that I see in these cards, and I think they're really beautiful. So I just wanted to like bring it into this piece. And I started, actually the first one that I got in Puerto Rico when I had my first show at Embajada. And then I started thinking, oh my God, this would be an amazing piece. Like in my head, I think of even these a prototype, because I want to make it like a huge wall of, or a whole room of these. And I'm just so intrigued of like the chrome. So these are already like pre-made. I just, collect them, put them together, and, just, yeah. And engrave, yeah.
And engrave them, yeah. So I wanted to, this room, a lot of the references are from the nameplate-necklace, and, that's kind of across many cultures is, marks milestones, marks, identity, and it's also kind of like self-proclamation, kind of like I'm here, I'm proud. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, all of these are engraved with words and lyrics and sayings. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship between wordplay and the nameplate and how that is connected to your work and thinking about desire? Could you also talk about the analogs between contemporary jewelry history in general, and desire?
Yeah, I think like the usage of text for me is just important. Like I think back of like when collecting jewelry through time, no? Like when you're born, like in Mexico, or I'm sure in other cultures too, like we'll get a little bracelet with your name, or when you're baptism, we get jewelry made for the baptism. So we're very think always about ornament to like celebrate things. So I think a lot of even this comes a little bit from it, and just, of course to give a little bit of context. But yeah, I think the usage of the text, I love doing the engraving, and going from engraving to the nameplate. I don't know what else I was trying to say.
And like just jewelry as this desire, high value, can you just talk about desire?
Yeah, sorry.
Can you talk about desire in different contexts? I think there's this relationship between desire and jewelry. It's very high value. It's made of precious materials. And so there's desire that way in the materiality, but you're also kind of analoging that with desire and aspiration and where you want to be in the world, kind of proclaiming what you see for yourself and announcing it in a nameplate.
Yeah, so you mean like the desire of, sorry, I'm just like, I haven't had so much sleep.
Desire in jewelry, like desire in the materiality. These are like, you're a magpie, you're drawn to it, and the history of jewelry is very much about desire and value. But could you talk also about the conceptual desire, like how they're connected?
From desiring.
Yeah. Like desire with the fountain, like desire, romantic desire, other kinds of desire, and the materiality. You just, yeah.
It's just like the wishing, the wishing of like using the material and like desiring to like even like the use of like gold and silver. So I feel people also like, and I think that kind of jumps into like the pawn shop idea, just even the outside, like desiring like the use of silver and golds, etc. Which, yeah, that jumps into, the pawn shop idea. And the pawn shop itself is supposed to be my idea of a pawn shop from like Tijuana and in Mexico. In Tijuana, San Isidro, we have a lot of pawn shops, and usually they're very like Spanglish looking. So I wanted to make this pawn shop. And this is La Casa de Empeño La Coqueta, which means like the coquette. And yeah, should I start talking about the inside?
Yeah, so we're about to enter the third space, and we'll kind of look at the face of the building and the installation itself, which holds kind of the rest of your small scale work that's in the exhibition. But even the face and the kind of the plating on the outside of this installation is engraved and ornamented. All of these signs are referencing specific spaces that you've been collecting. And then we can go talk about tus manos.
Tus manos, yes. So basically, what Sarah mentioned, when I said I wanted a third space, I kind of wanted to relate it to where I'm at and like the San Isidro, all these pawn shops that I see on the border. And I think a lot about like, I just wanted to be like this special spot for, also because I feel like my work has different, there's three different things that I basically do. I have a line of jewelry, I do my artwork, and then I also do work for artists. So I wanted to do like my small works and highlight a little bit of like celebrity work that I'd done. So I felt that was kind of like this precious, like more like pawn shop, like bling and like gold and all these things. So that's why we wanted to make this space that you go in and it's just, this idea of pawn shop, but still make it clean. And when we started putting the metal, I think a lot of the stuff was really beautiful that we just started developing, or like the ideas started changing through the show a little bit while we were installing, and I had this idea of like inviting a few artists to come and doodle. So a lot of these doodles are from artists based in here, so I invited them to come when I was installing, and I did a little just a little doodle based on my work. So I gave him a little bit of direction, so I guess it's a beautiful collaboration. And mis manos, which is actually my hands, I had a local artist, Chino, that came and tattooed me actually, and also I wanted to like mimic, it's kind of like me inviting you to my pawn shop. So it's basically me, with the tattoo and all my blingy, so there's few rings that are the same as these. And that was just a different element. I wanted to make it kind of like odd looking and just inviting you. We were also paying a lot of attention to a lot of details. There's like details even like the keychains, very personal details too. My numbers are 111, so I kind of wanted to personalize it too with the keys. And as we enter, or do you want to say anything before?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could hold up your hand to the installation so people can see. Chino and other amazing tattoo artists here in Houston kind of made an avatar of Georgina's arms, who's like physically inviting you and calling you into the pawn shop, again recalling desire, kind of coquette excitement, and so we'll welcome you in. Even the door is adorned with bells. So come on in. We'll gather around the cases here. It'll be a little bit tight, but just kind of circumambulate the whole tables. Yeah, everybody fit in.
I'll just wait. Should I wait a little? Yeah.
Everybody come in. We'll wait until everybody kind of circles in. There's plenty of room in here. It's deceiving. We'll come in. And we'll talk about the works kind of case by case. So, all right. Welcome to La Coqueta, Georgina's Pawn Shop. And we're going to start with just talking about this case.
So I still wanted to keep this like pawn shop looking space, but still, more clean to show some of the smaller works. So we decided to put these jewelry cases, and I'll start here. This is like my tortilla press series. So basically, just using like really like personal and typical objects that we recognizable from my culture, right? Like a tortilla press. So basically this whole piece is about process. So it's basically using the tortilla press as to make the imprints that you see here. So these are three brooches. So basically you can see here like the process of it. I made this beautiful video with an artist in LA, and it shows the whole process of it. So the process basically, using I use the material on the right side is like this clay that you fired it and it converts to silver. So I use the press to roll the actual medium, and then I use jewelry and press it. So I'm using the tortilla press as a press to imprint this instead of like casting. So it was really fun process. I made a couple different ones, and then these are the ones that I came up, and these are just jewelry that I have laying around, like these are all imprints of like chain. There's one that has an earring with like 2 piercings, and another one like a bamboo hoop that says I love you. So they were all very like organic and like very tortilla-like. So yeah, it was just really fun to make the piece.
Yeah, I wanted to also bring up something that again, thinking through jewelry language, the coin press is using actually a very traditional metalsmithing technique, which is just like a hammer roll. And so you're kind of overlaying these, very technical metalsmithing practices onto everyday life. So you're, seeing the coin souvenir press and thinking about metal rolling. And then here you're using silver clay, which is it's a precious metal clay. It's actually made of silver. And then when you're playing with it, you start thinking about masa and making tortillas. So again, overlaying silver into a technique of, making something else. So using that clay and in the same way that you would use masa to lay out the tortillas and imprint. Again, adorning, it's not enough for it to just be pressed through. You're adding more adornment and ornamentation to the surface by imprinting more chains, more words, more piercings. I think this is an incredible installation piece. This is brand new. So. All right, I'm going to let you talk about the center case, which is all made of pure, fine sterling silver.
Thank you. Lots of money in here. So I first, actually, this is the first piece I ever done, like the first bigger piece I done in sterling silver, which was commissioned by LA Times Image. So they invited me to do just a piece that will be in the actual, it was called LA Times Image. And I had done prior to this a prototype of a purse in brass, but I wanted to be more ambitious, and I saw it in my head as more like in sterling silver. So I had the help for, to make this piece. And the piece itself is called Que Perra, and it says carnitas ricas, which is like yummy meat. So this is all based on there's personal references in there, but mostly it's paying homage to this idea of in Mexico City there was this, I think it was about like 3 years ago, they banned some I don't know if you guys been to like Roma, Condesa. It's like the main towns in Mexico City where people hang out and like most of the tourists are. So basically the government banned all this beautiful imagery that is in the tacos and the taco stands and the fruterias, and it's just very beautiful and like also tacky but beautiful, like imagery like a Pikachu all bad drawn, or like Hello Kitty or the Simpsons. And I wanted to pay homage to all this imagery that was kind of erased. So basically the government wiped up all their shops and just paint them in white and put a government sign over them. So this is kind of like paying homage to this imagery that was lost, as well as some personal imagery. So this carnitas ricas. And then after that, from that piece, this was the second piece that came from it, which has also similar imagery from, also I'm from like the 90s, so there's a lot of like pop culture references. So it's supposed to be just like this maybe like dessert, or like really like janky looking like table setting, like spoons and knives. And then I was invited for another show. This is part of another show, these goblets. These are also there's similar reference to it, but this one was really interesting because I tend to collect a lot of things from flea markets and sometimes mold them and recontextualize them. So these were a series of 6 goblets that I found. And I took a mold of them, but the actual wax wasn't coming out, like the actual goblets. So what I did, I just started like adding different types of wax to create one goblet. So I ended up with these 4 designs, and a lot of them, like Sarah mentioned, like, you know, ornament on ornament, like the one with the wings, the handles are based on like the expanders, like the earring expanders. So that's how you hold the goblet. There's this one here that's supposed to be a ring goblet. So you actually put it on and it's a ring that, yeah, I can show them. Let's see if my nails allow me to. I made these nails for the show, so I usually don't work with nails. I wish. So maybe, oh yeah. So it's a ring, and I can, for the tequila or mezcal. So yeah, so you can wear it. And then also has an interesting sound to it. You know, there's lobster clasps and rings. So when I ornament, I do think of like, or ornamenting with jewelry, like with familiar jewelry tools or things that I use in my jewelry practice. So even carnitas ricas, like the piece itself has jewelry. So it's almost like jewelry on jewelry on jewelry. And it's really interesting how the mirrors here, I think a lot of the work, especially the Quepe wrappers, you could see the details from the mirror as well as here, like this Nike goblet. It has the Nike text on the back. So always thinking about like the back of the work, which comes from my jewelry practice. I feel in jewelry, there was always like the back should be as beautiful as the front, you know. And then, yeah.
I just wanted to add, so again, you know, I just wanted to point out that you, again, are like looking at space, like architectural spaces, infrastructural spaces, and noticing adornment, looking at hand-painted signs and stickers and engravings on the wall or doodles or graffiti, and then seeing that as ornament and like bringing those references into the work. And all of these are made with the lost wax technique, right? So Georgina is carving the wax and then making molds and then filling it with molten silver. So that's how all of these are made. Okay, we are heading to the last case, and I'll let you talk about the celebrity work.
Yeah. Thank you. So Sarah wanted to add a little bit of some glimpse of the work that I do with my celebrity work. So these are 2 of the one I've done. There's this balaclava that Bad Bunny wore for a Rolling Stones cover shoot. And it's pretty cool because we were able to get actually exclusive, the small image that you see, like we are the only ones that have it. I asked the editor, I met the editor of Rolling Stones a couple months ago, and I asked her to see if they can send me an actual photo of the Bad Bunny, because we were only able to get like BTS of him wearing it for this one, and I really wanted an actual picture, so we got the picture. So I'm sure you're asking like how do I'm involved with the celebrity stuff. This was a commission piece. It was sort of like a loan, so it was a commission piece, but I was able to get it back, which I think is really cool that now I own it. As far as direction, it was very open. They just wanted a balaclava and just for me to adorn it however I wanted. So yeah, that's the balaclava. And then this was for a Beyoncé teaser for her videos, and she wore it. It was just, I believe it was like a teaser video, and they also sent me, I think before the album dropped, I mean I had to sign like an NDA, but they sent me the inspiration and like the songs that were supposed to come out, so they gave me like 4 songs. So I actually made 4 earrings and a necklace. And this was the only picture that I was able to get, but the rest, supposedly they're still coming up, or Beyonce changes so much, I don't know. I think she's a new Beyonce from this time, but they're supposed to be more images and of her wearing other designs that I had made. Yeah, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so the photo that Georgina mentioned is an editorial photo from the Rolling Stone shoot it's previously unreleased, so we're getting special privileges, so take a look at that. Could you tell us a little bit about how, the swing sets, for example, those are all taken from music lyrics, from norteño music. And I know you mentioned, when we were working on the show together, that the thread and there's a through line of music and in all of your work. And could you talk a little bit about just sound? Even the fountain has this kind of kinetic and sound element to it. But could you talk about music and your work?
Yeah, I actually think that, we're always influenced by music, but I think for me it just reminds me of my childhood when I used to live in Mexico, so a lot of my references to music, I think they come from that time unconsciously too, and I think I sometimes actually make work without thinking they had music elements, so it's more like I think about it after, and I'm like, oh, I connected it to music, And I think, in general, music is so important, to for a specific time or so I think the music that I choose is definitely references my childhood times and this also norteña, and I feel people from the north are very if we compare from the south, norteño culture in general, we're very pride and and desirable and so I think unconsciously the music is just in the work.
Okay, well, I'm excited to see how that continues I think maybe there'll be an album drop from Georgina in the future. Okay, so we've gone through all of the spaces, and I'd love to open it up for questions because I know y'all probably want to talk to Georgina. So, any questions from the audience?
Yeah. Do you play music in the studio when you work?
Yes, I do.
The question was, do you play music in the studio when you work?
Yes, I do. And it differs. There's so many, but I do tend to put a lot of norteño music. So yeah, and I think especially if I'm working on something that I'm I'm doing about music or I'm not, then I'll listen, and I do get inspiration, of course, from the lyrics. Yeah.
I'll just add to that, it's not only listening to music, it's Georgina was singing karaoke during installation as well. I think this was one of the most dynamic install experiences I've ever witnessed. There was a nail set made, there were tattoos being given, there was karaoke. It was a really fun behind the scenes making this exhibition. And Georgina has a tattoo of the fountain.
Beyond your work just being gorgeous, I love that culturally we get a bit personal with you, with the press and all. When you're creating, do you always try to add a bit of your personal culture in? Because this is beautiful. Yesterday when I saw that in the video, I was like, oh my God, that's phenomenal. And it also gave us a sneak peek of who you are as a person. So do you always just subconsciously say, I'm going to put a bit of my cultural self in, or do you go strictly what do I have to do next? What's the next project?
Thank you. Yeah, I think to be honest, it's very organic. I don't think about it. I think it just comes to me. I try to also not stay away from typical, because you could be very literal and very land there to oh, it's so obvious. So I feel for example, this one's, it's not that crazy in your face, but it's still about process and it's a little more conceptual, but it still has, alone, it says hecho en Mexico, so it's I was conceived in Mexico, so there is this little snippets of things, but no, yeah, I just think it comes, there's no way to not, my culture or me not there. I feel there's always there, even if it's ornamenting something little, like even in the door, there's a keychain, and there's little things that, you know, even a decal that says San Diego, or like, you know, I try to always relate it or put a little bit in it without being too in your face, I guess.
I love that.
Yeah. Is there any more? Yeah.
How do you know when something's done?
Good question. I'm very extra.
Restate the question.
How do you know when something is done? I mean, I feel like I'm very extra. I feel like I can always go further and add, especially the fountain. I think I could go forever with it. I just have the feeling, you know, for me it's more like, okay, this is done, I shouldn't touch it. But I do have a hard time with that because I'm always like, more, you know. I am super maximalist.
And it's also, I mean, you also remix and recontextualize your own work, you know, like you kind of like throw back to former pieces and then incorporate them in a new way or rethink them, you know. Georgina mentioned this at the beginning, but all of those coins that are being tossed into the fountain with personal engravings, those are the start of a new project. So, you know,
Yeah, I think, and I think, like I said before, I think always like some of the work that I do, like I'm very obviously about the process. Like I'm in my studio and I collect a lot of little things, and I just bring into my studio. Sometimes I have an idea, and I don't actually do that much drawing. Actually, I just go straight to the work, and I'm just like I doodle actually after. So it's more like I'm very like spontaneous when it comes to the work. Like. One time I did a couple last year. Do you guys remember the cockroach for at the Met Gala? Like people were like making fun. There was like a meme on this cockroach that was in the red carpet. So the next day I woke up and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go buy a cockroach and bedazzle it. So I bought a cockroach, put jewelry on it, and in my head like that's a little object. But then I was like, oh, it could be a cool t-shirt. So I did a t-shirt of the object. So I always think of like, how can this object exist somewhere else? And I think my head is starting to think even more and more. Like I have another exhibition right now at the Menge Museum in San Diego, and it's actually, it's a 2-foam piece. So it's also interactive. It's a piece that, it's a 2-part show. It's in San Diego and in Tijuana. So there's 2 flip phones, and they both have lines. And the idea is that you text your thoughts to the other side of the border, and then you have the number for the other. So I'll be collecting all these text messages, and I'm planning to do a little scene or book on this, which is actually very similar to this, you know, collecting your thoughts. So I think I've been thinking a lot about how from one it can exist something else. I actually wrote a little, now that you said when you stop, I wrote a little scene on this Friends magazine called Craft Desert, and the article is called Fuck It, Is This Too Much? Which I talk about like when do I stop? Like I always tell my friends, like I'll text them and I'll be like, hey, is this too much? Like my outfit, you know? So that's the title of, but if you're interested I can send you the link, because this is, I interviewed like 3 other artists, Barbara Sanchez-Gain, Yvette Mayorga, which also do different practices that are very extra in their work. So I emailed them about the project, and the way it's laid out in the Scene magazine is like text. So I just basically text them the question, and we printed the actual text. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about collaboration in your work. We'll open it back up. But you know, this was a really collaborative process. Some of the artists who were here assisting, Xochi, there were so many incredible and talented artists that you bring into your world. And could you just talk about collaboration and your practice in general, bringing people together?
Yeah, I think since day one, like I feel like a lot of my work is based in a lot of collaboration. I mean, since even in more of like my fashion work, you know, I try to work with like photographers or stylists, and I think it's just so beautiful to, you know, collaborate and have a different audience. And I feel for me it's more like just like a challenge, and it's so beautiful to like learn new mediums and techniques, you know, keep keep pushing myself, and more meeting people. I feel like I love how collaborating just like makes like amazing friends, and just like, I mean, this between Sarah and me, you know, we were working for months in this, and it's just like we even became closer. So I feel like that part of like meeting people and having beautiful people in your life is part of the collaboration. I don't know if I said it.
Thought I saw some hands or starts of hands. So.
Hi. You have such a playfulness in your work. Was that something that was always present, or something that you grew into? Was there a moment in which you like had an epiphany or something, or was it always kind of a part of your creative style?
Unfortunately, yes. I'm super fun. Yeah, like I said, I feel like my work in general, like, is an extension of me. You know, I think if you were to shake myself, I am the work. I feel I'm very connected to it, in all the details, and just, yeah, I think I'm so playful, even in my practice. Like, yes, I play music, I dance, like I take breaks, like karaoke, like you know, that's my passion. So it's like, I have always a lot of fun. Like, I started actually teaching like a few years ago, and also in my teachings I also tend to be very playful, like exercises even. So I think, yeah, playful is definitely there.
I think that actually brings us back a little bit to like tying it to music and tying it to like collaborating with celebrities and collaborating with other artists. It felt, you know, a bit the installation process and the way you brought in tattoo artists and other amazing artists and nail artists. There's Nikki who was doing nails. It almost felt like you were like a producer in a music studio. A little bit. It felt a little bit like bringing people onto tracks for collaborations. That's something that just came to me. But I think that's a really nice analog with what you're doing in your work.
No, I agree. I mean, it is not all about me, you know, like, but yeah, I just think collaborating is just magical, you know, so yes. Even, I mean, collaborate in that sense, and also I tend on more of like my fashion side, I have like big collaborations coming up, and it's also just so interesting to, you know, have different types of collaborations.
Other questions? Okay, well, we have about 10 minutes, so I think if we're going to be in the galleries, Georgina will be here to answer other questions, so just find her while we walk around. Please enjoy the show. Thank you so much for coming. Toss a coin, please. Everybody engrave and toss a coin, and then keep your eye out for when Georgina remixes your coin into a zine. And thank you again for coming, and please give it up for Georgina again. Thanks.